Thank you for tuning into this video. If you're here, it's because you're interested in using AI to make your game master life easier and to enhance your ability to run your game. So this is video number 2. If you haven't watched the first one, I recommend checking that one out first because it lays out the philosophy of what I'm going to be doing here and sort of sets the stage. So what we're going to be talking about in this video is how to clone yourself within AI. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about Claude because that's the one that I'm using. So I'm going to be talking about how you clone yourself within Claude. And then we're going to talk about how to clone all the knowledge you have about your campaign and any campaign lore documents you have, how to put them into Claude so that when Claude is trying to help you out, it understands you and it understands your campaign. But before that, I want to talk about one workflow thing that will make your life easier when it comes to doing all of this. Don't type. I know, it seems crazy, but don't type any of this stuff when you're starting to work on this. Claude AI as well as ChatGPT have voice-to-text functions. I will tell you this right now, though. The ChatGPT one is money. It is the best voice-to-text experience I've ever had in my life. Claude is a beast when it comes to creative writing. When it comes to a lot of things, quite frankly. Claude is currently the best when it comes to a lot of things AI right now, at least on the consumer level. But the one thing ChatGPT does like nothing else is voice to text. You can use the one in Claude AI. It works. And the one thing to be aware of, it doesn't need to be perfect. Because it's an AI, it can usually figure out what you're trying to say, even if you mess up and stumble over your words. So it doesn't need to be perfect, and the Claude voice to text is good enough. What I usually do is I have ChatGPT up in one window, Claude up in another, and I do all of my talking to ChatGPT, and then I just copy and paste it into Claude. That's my preferred workflow, but you don't have to complicate it the way I did. I will say this, if you have WhisperFlow, that's just a general voice-to-text app. That is actually really good. Not as good as ChatGPT, but it is better than Claude's voice-to-text. Reason why I'm spending so much time on this topic is your experience of using Claude to work for you will be so much better if you can just talk to it and you don't have to type. Because you can just go free associate and just riff and keep on talking without having to edit yourself, without having to get carpal tunnel from all the typing you're going to do. Voice to text is the way when it comes to this. All right. So the first main thing you're going to want to do when starting your AI journey within Claude is creating a master prompt. This is your game master philosophy document. This is how you clone yourself and teach Claude to understand how you think. And so what I want you to do is take what I'm going to tell you verbatim and put it into Claude. And I'm actually going to read it off for you right now. This is what I used. I want you to create a master prompt for my game master philosophy. This will assist you in collaborating with me on content creation for my tabletop role-playing game. First, I'm going to tell you everything I can think of. Then I want you to interview me and get any additional information that you need. All right. So what am I doing here? I'm telling Claude the role I want it to play for me. So I want Claude to act as an assistant or a collaborator for my tabletop role-playing game. So Claude now understands what I want it to do. The other thing I told it is we're creating a master prompt here. And the purpose of the master prompt is to basically have one source for all the information about me as a game master. Then the next thing I did was I told it that I'm going to information dump. I'm going to tell it everything about me. And then finally, and this is an important part, is I then told it when I'm done with that information dump, I want it to interview me and ask me any questions that it needs in order to get the understanding it needs in order to create this master prompt. That's important because everyone's a little bit different. I like to think I'm pretty good at doing an information dump. I'm pretty good at riffing off the cuff when it comes to philosophy and my beliefs and thoughts about things. But other people aren't. My wife recently created something similar like this, but for work. She wanted to have a collaborator that she could consult with when it came to job decisions. But she actually doesn't really work really good off the cuff when it comes to her philosophy about her job. So she actually did much better with being interviewed by Claude for creating her master prompt for her specific purposes. So both pieces are important. Depending on your strengths, one will be more important than the other. So what do you want to tell Claude? You want to tell it who you are as a GM. What is your philosophy about game mastering? What do you believe in as a game master? What are the things that you think belong in your games? What doesn't belong in your game? What are your strengths as a game master? What are your weaknesses as a game master? Weaknesses are important. One of the things Claude has been able to do for me is when we're creating content, it's able to point out things that are in my blind spots or that are sort of connected to my weaknesses. And so when we're creating things, it will point out things that I'm not good at and make suggestions or things that I tend to ignore in the games, or when I'm creating content for the games, it will highlight those things for me because because Claude knows it's a blind spot, it knows it's a weakness for me. So you want to tell it about your weaknesses and your blind spots. You want to tell Claude your priorities when it comes to content creation, priorities at the table, and how you want things to run at the table. For me, pacing is really important as a game master. And so when I'm creating content, I'm always keeping pacing in mind. And Claude knows that about me. And so when we're creating content, it can make comments about pacing to make sure that I'm not creating something that might bog things down too much, or how to streamline things or craft things so that the pacing works out correctly. So for me, pacing is really important. So what are your priorities in game? What are your deal breakers? What are the things that you can't have in your games? What are the things that you don't want at your table? Tell Claude about those things. What kind of game do you run? Do you run a more linear, story-focused game? Do you run something more sandboxy? It's important for Claude to understand these things. Do you tend to run a combat-heavy game? Or do you run sessions that could be nothing but social interaction and role play, and you might go a couple of sessions without ever having a combat encounter? So what are the form that your games tend to take? Claude should know this. What kind of balance do you want between role play and combat in your games? This is something that's very important for Claude to know, because the better Claude understands you, your games and the kind of games you like to run, the better it's going to do when it comes time to help you. So you want to make sure Claude understands all of these things. Now, once you've told Claude everything that you can think of, tell Claude you're done. Okay, this is everything I could think of. Now, what questions do you have for me? So now Claude's going to give you a series of questions. Answer those questions. Now, Claude in particular will sometimes give you multiple choice questions, and it usually gives you an option to put in whatever you want. This, depending on your style, I usually just clicked on the option to give my own answers and not just select one of its options. And I'll usually just talk and tell it. Because sometimes the options it gives me, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so I will tell Claude, my answers, not necessarily the ones that it's offering me. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. If it gives you multiple choice options, you don't have to just pick one. You can, pick the option where you get to go other and explain what it is you want. Because maybe the truth is actually a combination of some of what the questions, the content of the questions that it gave you. So go through the interview. Then when you're done, say, okay, I've answered all your questions. Do you have any more questions for me? Any clarifying questions that you now have based on the answers that I gave you? And guess what? It usually does. And so answer those questions. Now, one of the things I'm going to suggest, if you're on the free plan of Claude, make sure that you're using the high effort version of Sonnet. You want to get the most brain power out of this that you can. If you signed up for a pro plan, use Opus. Your master prompt is so important. You're going to want to use the AI model with the most brain power. And right now that one is Opus, at least within Claude. If you're in the free plan, don't worry about it. Sonnet does a great job. But if you have Opus available, I would use Opus for this task. All right. Now, once you've done with all this, you've answered all of Claude's questions, you've done the brain dump that you have of all of your GM philosophy. Now you're going to tell Claude, I want you to craft a master prompt of everything that we just talked about. Create that master prompt, my master game master philosophy document. And Claude is going to compile that for you. Now, within your project, there are two sections that I want to point out to you. One is there's a section for files. Just want you to know it exists. We don't have to worry about that right now. But then there's another section for instructions. What you're going to do is you're going to copy and paste your philosophy document into the instructions. Now, matter of fact, if we rewind a bit, you can even tell Claude when you're crafting your master prompt, you can say, I'm going to be putting this master prompt into the project instructions. Please take that into account when crafting it. Won't really make that much of a difference, but the more specific you are with Claude, oftentimes the better result you're going to get. And so you're going to copy and paste your master prompt right into the project instructions. What does that do? That means every single chat you open up in your Claude project will always take your GM philosophy into account. This is how you essentially clone yourself, and your entire philosophy about gaming will filter into every single thing you create in this project now, because it's living in your project instructions. That's the power of the project within Claude or any other AI model. So now we've done the important first step. We've cloned you and put you into Claude. But now we need to clone something else. We need to clone all of the knowledge you have about your campaign and put it into Claude. And this is campaign context. And what you're going to be creating are campaign context documents. You're going to create a master campaign context, and you might also along the way create supplemental context documents. So what I do now is I open up a brand new fresh chat. And so there are different ways you can go about this. You may already have documents saved on your computer that have campaign lore. You might have all of your players' backstories. You might have, notes about your main villain and the plot or campaign arc that you're imagining for your campaign. So you might already have all of this stuff. Take all of it, drag and drop it right into the chat. And then what you're going to do is you're going to tell Claude, take a look at the attached files. What we're going to do here is create a campaign context document for my tabletop role-playing campaign. And this is where, once again, talk to Claude and tell it everything you can possibly think of about your campaign world that isn't in those documents. And if you don't have any documents and your brain is the master source of all the information for your campaign, you're going to want to brain dump right into Claude. Now, I am going to take a moment to just go back to the voice to text thing real quick, because it just occurred to me something that I learned the hard way that you might want to be aware of. When I'm doing the voice to text thing, I usually do it in chunks. You could do one long thing, but it's possible you could run out of bandwidth of what the voice to text app or model might be able to handle in one chunk. Or you could do what I've done, is I hit the wrong button, which cancels out the voice to text, and I lose everything I just said. So I recommend doing it in chunks. What I'll usually do is tell Claude, I'm going to be brain dumping a bunch of things. Don't respond or process it until I tell you I'm done. So this way you can keep on doing your voice to text, keep on hitting enter, entering it into the chat without Claude then digesting it just yet. Or if you're copy and pasting from ChatGPT like I do, I'll just copy and paste in chunks into one long thing into Claude. But yeah, I recommend doing it in chunks. There is a chance that you could end up talking too much and exceeding what the voice to text can handle, or you might hit the wrong button and lose everything you just said. So do it in chunks. Trust me, you'll be happy you did the moment you make a mistake. All right, campaign context documents. So you're going to want to do a brain dump of everything about your campaign. So you're going to want to do everything about your campaign world. The world, factions, NPCs, villains, allies, everything. You want to give Claude everything. The other thing that you're going to want to do is give it all of your players. Tell it about your players. Tell it about, so if let's say you've got a player who's a min-maxer, and they're always optimizing their characters, that's useful information for Claude to have. Because when it's making suggestions, it'll know this, and there might be moments where that's important. So tell it everything about your players and how they play. If you've got a player who really doesn't get into the mechanical stuff of the game and is all about the role play, it's good for Claude to know about that. There's a couple of different versions of this out there. In the book by Laws, he talks about the different kinds of players. The Angry GM does 7 different kinds of fun. That's his version of it. There's a couple of different versions of this out there, where different players gravitate towards different elements of the game. It can be really helpful for Claude to know where your players fall into that. It's helpful for you to know where your players fall into that, because it helps you design content that's going to tickle the brains of your specific players, and engage the things that your players find fun. So it's helpful for Claude to know these things about your players. Then the player characters. It's helpful for the players, for Claude to know the characters' backstories. If you've already been brainstorming possible plot hooks that tie into your players' backstories, give those to Claude. That's going to be very helpful for when you're doing content creation. If you've got things that your players do that can break the game, tell Claude about it. So, for example, in my current campaign, I'm doing a Fallout game, and one of my players is a synth. And one of the things they have is stealth technology built into their synth, infrastructure. And that has the potential to be game breaking if not handled correctly. But one of the things I told Claude in my master game philosophy document, in my master prompt, is when it comes to potentially game breaking abilities that my players have, one of my philosophies is I don't want to punish a player for that. If they invested in a skill or an ability, I want to reward them for that investment. When they utilize it in game, I want to reward them for it. But at the same time, I do not want to allow that ability to break the adventure. So when we're creating content, Claude knows that's my philosophy from my master prompt. Now, in the context, I'm now telling it about these potential game-breaking abilities. So when we're creating content, Claude can make suggestions. Here are some things that you can give this player to reward their stealth approach, while at the same time not breaking the adventure. So we can craft the adventure in a way where this ability doesn't break it, but it allows the player to advance forward and be successful when using this ability. So tell Claude about any abilities that could be potentially maybe a little overpowered or game breaking when it comes to your game. Another example is another one of my players is able to use scrying. And this is another thing that could be potentially game breaking if not handled correctly. But when creating content with Claude, it'd be like, hey, you might want to keep in mind so-and-so's scrying ability. Here are some suggestions on things to put in this adventure that will reward this player for using that ability, but at the same time doesn't break the game. So I tell Claude all about any game-breaking abilities or skills the players have. It's also helpful for, depending on what game system you're using, to know what level your players are at. How many players do you have in the game? So, if you've got a six-player party at level 8, that'll help Claude dial in some of the recommendations that it's going to give you if it knows the player level and the player numbers. So this is really important information for Claude to have, and you want to give it all of it. Now, one of the things that you can ask Claude as you're creating your master document, your master campaign context document, now depending on how much information you're giving Claude, you could ask Claude this. With all the information that I'm giving you, should we contain it in one master campaign context document, or should we have a master campaign context and break out some of this information into other context documents? So maybe you're going to have a campaign context, a master campaign context that has a little bit of everything, but you have deeper knowledge about your player character backstories in a player context document. Maybe you have a deeper knowledge about a certain faction and a faction campaign context document. Maybe you have a context document for the main villain to your campaign. So as you're creating your main campaign context document, ask Claude, do we have too much information for just one context document? And should we have one broad framework document? And should we break out the rest into individual context documents? And Claude will give you the best read as to what will be easier for Claude to handle. And a lot of times what ends up happening is in your master campaign context document, it'll have sort of a summary of all these things in there, but then it'll reference these breakout documents that you're going to create. And just ask Claude. Claude will tell you the best approach when it comes to handling all of this information. And so now you're creating all of these context documents. Your master document, which has all of the main macro framework to your campaign, main NPCs, villains. It has your players, your player characters, any plot hooks for your player characters might be in there as well. Claude may have also recommended breaking out some of this information into more specific context documents for factions, NPCs, player characters. Now, what do you do with all these? If you remember earlier, I told you your Claude project has a couple of areas. It has your chats, it has your campaign instructions where we put your master GM prompt, and then it has campaign files. Now, all the files you just created in this context document chat now go into campaign files. Now, as far as formatting goes, I would recommend having Claude output them in Markdown. Markdown is a universal format that you can use in a lot of text editors, and it's also native to a lot of AIs. So it's the easiest thing and will cost the least amount of your usage for Claude or other AIs to read and work from. So take those Markdown documents and put them right into your campaign project files. So now, one of the things you can now do, and this is unfortunately the process that I had to go through. Now, you could actually jot some notes down now and get it right the first time. So this was the process that I went through. I created my master prompt, then I created my context documents, put them into files. Now, I could open up a new chat and say, okay, I want you to load up the campaign context document, and now we go ahead and create something. But what you can actually also do is in your master prompt, in your game master prompt, you can actually put in there, whenever we create something in a new Claude chat, I always want you to load up the current version of the campaign context from files. And so now whenever you open up a chat, your game master prompt is always an instruction, so your philosophy is always loaded up. And now, because you've instructed within the instructions, to always load up the campaign context, Claude is also aware of your campaign context now. And you don't even have to instruct it to look in the files to do so. So now whenever you open up a chat, you've got your GM philosophy loaded up, and you have your campaign context loaded up. It now knows everything about you as a game master, and it knows everything it needs to know about your campaign in order to create stuff for you. And now this is your foundation for content creation within Claude AI. All right, that's where we're going to wrap up this video. The next video is going to go over some of the more advanced stuff that you might want to create for your Claude or AI-driven game master journey. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next one.